So, good morning, everyone, and those joining online. Those online don't have to do this, but for those here, I think you've all sussed it out, but you need your headphones on. So if you put those on, then you should be able to hear what's coming through the microphones. So great, fantastic. So welcome to this inclusive ocean acidification action event, Science to Society. Ocean acidification is a direct result of human industrial emissions. And the ocean's taken up a third of these emissions released since the start of the Industrial Revolution. The impacts of this acidification are beginning to lead to a reduction of habitat area, biodiversity, and ecosystem functioning and services. The unprecedented rate of change does not leave time for natural adaptation of ecosystems. So ocean acidification is directly relevant to the UNFCCC, which defines adverse effects of climate change as significant deleterious effects on the composition, resilience, or productivity of natural and managed ecosystems. So this side event showcases how ocean acidification capacity development activities in the Commonwealth are the first steps to developing mitigation and adaptation strategies to support the SDG target 14.3, which says to minimize and address the impacts of ocean acidification, including through enhanced scientific cooperation at all levels. And although ocean acidification is happening at the global level, it is realized at the local level. So local and regional action is essential to develop the adaptation and mitigation strategies needed to ensure local policy and actions are addressing regional variability and local conditions. At our event today, speakers representing the Commonwealth Blue Charter action groups for ocean acidification and ocean observation will highlight activities at national and local levels focusing on ocean acidification. We'll also be hearing from the Ocean and Climate Change Action Group, championed by Fiji. They will stress the importance of inclusive action to decrease the impacts of increased ocean acidification. The event will provide the possibility to showcase how international networks like the Commonwealth Blue Charter and the Global Ocean Acidification Observing Network can provide an enabling framework to work together. In line with the UN Decade of Ocean Science for Sustainable Development, the aims of the event today are to communicate existing knowledge on ocean acidification, convey new findings to policymakers and stakeholders, and increase ambition via new commitments from member states to sustain and establish ocean observations for ocean acidification. So, before we start with our panelists, we're just going to watch some extracts of videos produced for the Ocean Acidification Ocean Decade program, Ocean Acidification Research for Sustainability, including some high-level remarks from Peter Thompson, the UN's Special Envoy for the Ocean. I'm sure this video will provide an ideal introduction to the upcoming discussion. Thank you.
Ladies and gentlemen, at the heart of the red alert are anthropogenic greenhouse gases and their relationship to the health of the ocean. As you well know, CO2 absorbed by the ocean reacts with seawater, causing changes in its carbonate chemistry in the processes that we call ocean acidification. With the ocean being the planet's largest carbon sink, absorbing around 23% of annual CO2 emissions generated by human activity, we see again the imperative of safeguarding the ocean's health. While the ocean's absorption of CO2 has been central to the mitigation of the impacts of climate change, it has its limits. We expect the ocean to continue taking up CO2 as atmospheric concentrations increase, but the efficiency of that uptake is projected to decline as a result of the decreasing buffering capacity of surface waters. The reduction in buffering capacity will in turn lead to greater rates of ocean acidification per unit of CO2 taken up. At this point, let us reiterate that the IPCC has stated with certainty that ocean acidification is occurring due to anthropogenic CO2 emissions. In the meantime, led by IOC UNESCO, we've begun work on the UN Decade of Ocean Science to give us the science we need for the ocean we want. It cannot be said enough that scientific research and evidence must be the basis of effective national and international policy to take us to the net zero world needed for human security on this planet. In pursuit of reliable science, we look to the Global Ocean Acidification Observing Network, known as GOON, for global leadership on ocean acidification research and for continuing facilitation of coordination of efforts, knowledge sharing, and capacity building. I'd like to take this opportunity to thank all those involved in the work of GOON for this leadership, and I'm delighted to see the emergence of its UN Decade-endorsed program, Ocean Acidification Research for Sustainability, also called OARS. I wish everyone involved in the OARS program great success and will follow your progress with great interest.
I'm absolutely delighted that the OARS project has been formally endorsed by the UN Decade of Ocean Science as a programme. It means we can continue the great work started by GOAN and provide the scientific evidence needed for society and policymakers. OARS aims to provide a vision and a framework by which scientists all over the planet can come together to create the scientific evidence we need as a community. We hope to be able to increase the amount of monitoring that we can do for ocean acidification and the changes to ocean chemistry that it will produce. We hope to explore in greater detail the impacts that are likely to occur on marine ecosystems and the organisms that live within them, and ultimately help provide the scientific evidence that will allow us to sustainably manage and protect marine ecosystems and the goods and services they provide. At the end of the 10 years, what we hope is that OARS will have provided us with much greater understanding of ocean acidification, enabling us to better mitigate and adapt to the changes that are likely to occur, and ultimately support the clean and healthy and productive oceans that we all want.
Major goal of the United Nations Decade of Ocean Science for Sustainable Development is to build capacity to assure that the world has ocean science capability on a truly global scale. This matches the efforts to date of the Global Ocean Acidification Observing Network, known as GOON.
At the other end of the scale, it also allows us to focus on collecting locally relevant scientific evidence by empowering more people to actively monitor their own local environments and ecosystems.
The work of our UN-endorsed program, Ocean Acidification Research for Sustainability, OARS, leverages GOON's work to enhance ocean acidification capacity building and to better connect these efforts to decision makers and society.
Thank you. So it's now my pleasure to hand over to Toby Fisher, who is the Deputy Director of the International Environmental Law Team at the New Zealand Ministry of Foreign Affairs and Trade. New Zealand are the champions of the Commonwealth Blue Charter Action Group on ocean acidification, and Toby's team advises on a wide range of legal issues, including climate change, biodiversity, oceans and fisheries, and Antarctica. Toby previously led the General International Law Team, advising the New Zealand government on a range of challenging issues, including international human rights law, space law, and treaties. Prior to joining the Ministry of Foreign Affairs and Trade, Toby was a New Zealand Crown Counsel and a barrister in the UK for over 10 years. So, Toby, pleasure to have you on the panel, and over to you.
Kia ora koutou katoa. Good morning. It's a privilege to be here to speak today, and I'd like to thank the Commonwealth Secretariat for arranging today's meeting and also inviting me to speak. It's a delight to be able to speak, not only because this is an issue which I think is incredibly important, but also the co-benefit is that I get to demask for a very short period, and any opportunity to demask is well appreciated. I've been asked to provide an introduction to the Commonwealth Blue Charter Ocean Acidification Action Group. I'm really delighted to do so because it's something which New Zealand thinks is really important. And I want to start by outlining why New Zealand decided this is an area we should focus on. First, New Zealand is a country in and of the Pacific. We're a large ocean state, and our neighbours, our Pacific neighbours, are large ocean states. So the ocean goes to the core of our identity in New Zealand, particularly for Indigenous New Zealanders, Māori, for whom their relationship with Tangaroa is an identity relationship. Ocean acidification will adversely affect economies that depend on fisheries, economies that depend on marine tourism. It'll affect coastal communities that rely on coral reefs for protection. And it will affect marine biodiversity and conservation more generally. Now, Commonwealth countries are responsible for around about a third of the world's national coastal waters. So many of us, including New Zealand, will be vulnerable to these impacts. It seemed to us that the Commonwealth, working across regions, was well placed to make a contribution to addressing the significant threat to livelihoods, well-being, and the planet. We also thought this would be a way for the Commonwealth to contribute to the achievement of SDG 14.3 to minimise and address the impacts of ocean acidification, including through enhanced scientific cooperation at all levels. The action group that's been established is committed to sharing knowledge, experience, and best practice on the impacts of ocean acidification. Its first activity was a workshop that we hosted in New Zealand. The workshop was an opportunity to tap into the collective knowledge of Commonwealth officials and international experts, and we're really grateful for the contributions that everyone made who came to attend. The workshop was designed to drill into practical things that countries could do to build resilience to ocean acidification, such as how to reduce other stresses to the marine environment and the types of research needed to inform those decisions. One of the driving principles of the action group is the need to focus on concrete outcomes. We don't want it to be just a talking shop. And at the workshop, we identified a clear need for a go-to resource for policymakers. Participants at the workshop had recognized that most available ocean acidification resources require technical expertise and implementation capacity that's not readily available to policymakers and not available in Commonwealth countries. And so the resource that was developed and commissioned on behalf of the action group is a resource that's now entitled Policymakers' Handbook for Addressing the Impacts of Ocean Acidification. The handbook is designed to address the gap in information by identifying and contextualizing existing resources to facilitate the identification and implementation of strategies to address ocean acidification. I'd really like to acknowledge the work done particularly by Christina McGraw, Kim Curry, Cliff Law, and Jesse Vance in bringing this to fruition. The handbook explains ocean acidification, it identifies practical strategies to address ocean acidification, and it covers monitoring, stakeholder engagement, identifying policy vehicles, and creating partnerships. It includes case studies from across the Commonwealth, and we're grateful to the members of the action group for their contributions. So what's next? Well, COVID-19 has had a pretty significant impact on the group's development of next steps, but one area we've discussed is potential collaboration with the action group on ocean observation. So we're delighted that the Commonwealth Secretariat has brought us together in this event, and we look forward to furthering this discussion. To finish, I'd like to quote New Zealand's Minister of Foreign Affairs, Nanaia Mahuta, at the launch of the policy handbook, when she spoke to the true reason we're here today at this event and at this conference. Toi tū te marae a tāne Mahuta. Toi tū marae a Tangaroa. Toi tū te tangata. If the land is well and the sea is well, the people will thrive. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Toby, for setting the scene there and really sort of describing what New Zealand's been doing on ocean acidification through the action group. And as you just mentioned, you're trying to partner with the Ocean Observation Action Group, championed by Canada on this one. And we do have Dr. Kamiko Azutu-Scott, who's a research scientist at Fisheries and Oceans Canada at the Bedford Institute of Oceanography, joining us online now. So welcome, Dr. Azutu-Scott. Can you hear us okay? Fantastic. So Dr. Azutu-Scott is an adjunct in the Department of Oceanography at Dalhousie, as well as working at Bedford. Her research interests include climate change and ocean carbon cycles, ocean acidification in the North Atlantic and the Arctic. She is a scientific steering committee member for the Northeastern Coastal Acidification Network, ecosystem studies of subarctic and Arctic seas, ESAS, the Synoptic Arctic Survey, Canadian Ocean Acidification Community of Practice, a Canadian representative for the Global Ocean Ship-Based Hydrographic Investigations Programs, known as GOSHIP, the Integrated Marine Biochemistry and Ecosystem Research Program, and a lead author for Arctic Monitoring Assessment Program, AMAP, reports 1 and 2 on Arctic ocean acidification. So that's an impressive CV, and we look forward to hearing from you more on the Canadian perspective of ocean acidification in the Arctic, but also about the goer-on-in-a-box technologies that you've been working to implement through the Commonwealth Blue Charter. Over to you.
Thank you very much, Nick. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you loud and clear.
First of all, thank you very much for the opportunity today. I will talk about Canadian effort in the Arctic. Arctic is changing very rapidly, warming at the rate 3 times faster than any other region on Earth. Left side figure shows annual surface temperature trend patterns from 1971 to 2019. On average, the increase is 3.1 degrees Celsius. In some part, it's more than 10 degrees during this period. And ice cover is reducing. The figure below shows average monthly Arctic sea ice extent in July from 1979 to 2021, declining rate at 7.5% per decade. And other changes include freshening surface waters, increased energy and CO2 exchange between the ocean and atmosphere, and seasonal ultralight penetration and propagates to the different marine ecosystem changes. And permafrost thawing and coastal erosions occurring all over the Arctic. And ocean acidification. The Arctic is the first ocean, actually, ocean basin which aragonite unsaturation was observed. So tipping point has arrived already. And models suggest that the majority of the Arctic surface water will be undersaturated with respect to aragonite by the middle of the century. So we need to increase observation to understand temporal and spatial variability of ocean acidification and their unique controlling mechanisms in the Arctic in collaboration with international group of scientists and people in local communities. So Global Ocean Acidification Observing Network, GOON, one of the goals is to improve our understanding of global OA conditions. So they develop a low-cost kit used for monitoring ocean acidification around the world called GOON in a Box. So GOON in a Box is building capacity and help filling gaps in ocean acidification observation. And GOON in a Box kit have been distributed to the scientists all over the world, including Africa, Pacific, small island nations, and Latin America. And the Ocean Foundation hosted various regional training sessions and produced the instructional videos in multiple languages. So Canadian Blue Charter Action Group, Ocean OO in Canada, initiated to the GOON in the Box assembly to work with scientists in Commonwealth nations. And among them, 3 of them will go up to the Arctic indigenous communities. Unfortunately, COVID-19 really slowed down the procurement of these GOON in a Box kits. But as soon as we assemble all the parts and test them, we start distributing GOON in a Box to Commonwealth countries. And the first site we are planning to send is Tuktoyaktuk. Tuktoyaktuk is along the Beaufort Sea coast, shown in the yellow stain left side. at the mouth of the Mackenzie River. Mackenzie River is the largest North American Arctic river, and so large that the watershed extends to 20% of Canadian landscape. And permafrost melt due to increasing temperature and the lack of ice protection, leading to the coastal erosion around this region, sometimes reaching to the 40 meter annually. And the left side photos shows that actually the cliff really falling into the sea. Because of that, so much fresh water comes in, and total organic carbon from the coastal erosion accelerate coastal acidification in this area. So Tuktoyaktuk is at the scientifically very critical location. And people in the community interested in climate change and climate change research, and they have a long history of collaboration with scientists. And left side photo shows the Dustin Whaling, scientist at the Bedford Institute, working with the local community to study and monitor coastal erosion. And I joined them in March 2020 to start coastal acidification observation. And temperature is minus 36 degrees Celsius, and with wind chill minus 50, then without help from the local community, there is no way we can proceed research there. And Obi, you can see in the right side photo. By the way, the blue jacket is me and the dark jacket is Obi. And he's a local hunter, and he helped us through the sampling, and he knows where I should go to do my research. And because I wanted to have certain criteria of the region, and he knows the spot, and he knows how to get there. And most importantly, he knows when we should go. It's really a dangerous thing with that cold and wind. So if he says we can go, we really rely on his judgment. So working with the local communities with Go in the Box, we are really looking forward to work on seasonal change of the coastal observation. And the two other sites we are thinking about is the Northwest Passage and the coastal community in Baffin Island. So what's the next step? It is very important to include indigenous and local knowledge to the Arctic wave research, and especially ecosystem monitoring. They know where the ecosystem hotspots are, and they are such a keen observer of ecosystem change. And it's really important to co-develop the OA research in the Arctic with the indigenous and local communities. And capacity building in the remote Arctic communities lead to the resilience of projects. COVID-19 pandemic had a major impact on Arctic research due to the limited access. After March 2020, I couldn't go back to the community because research activity north of 60 was suspended to protect the local community. So my science gear and samples are still up there. But Dustin Whaling's group, who has been working with local community for decades, they keep going monitoring because the local community knows what needs to be done. And through emails and through Zoom meetings, they actually conducted monitoring by themselves. And in support with the Oral Research Institute, which is like 2 hours inland, they have an amazing facility. So it's really important to develop the local capacity for the observation. And going in the Arctic Hub, we try to develop Pan-Arctic Coastal OA network in collaboration with local communities through workshops, visiting the sites, and Go in a Box kits. And we are really looking forward to develop this network. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dr. Kamiko Azetsu-Scott. It's now my pleasure to introduce our next speaker, who is Penahuro Fatu-Lefale. I hope I got that right. Penahuro is an internationally acclaimed climate and policy analyst. He has a long history of work in international climate science and policy implementation. Most notably of his achievements in climate policy include his outstanding work on the Second World Climate Conference in 1990, where together with a small team from small island developing states, they established the Alliance of Small Island States. He was one of the first Pacific people involved in the negotiations of the UN Framework Convention on Climate Change between 1991 to 1992, the Berlin Mandate from 1993 to 1995, and the Kyoto Protocol from 1995 to 1997. He rejoined the UNFCCC COP negotiations and related meetings in 2015 for COP21 to COP24, and has been alternate permanent representative of New Zealand with the World Meteorological Organization from 2012 to 2014. Currently, he is full professional member of the American Meteorological Society, Royal Society of New Zealand, and Friends of Te Papa. He's authored a number of papers on climate science and climate policy from a small islands perspective, and has a doctorate in philosophy on climate change and disaster risk management. So it's my pleasure to hand over to you. I must say you do not look old enough to have achieved all that, but it's great to have you with us speaking today, and we look forward to hearing what you have to say from a small island's perspective on ocean acidification.
Maloni, tēnā koutou, tēnā koutou, tēnā koutou katoa. Before I speak on the topic I'm assigned to do, I just want to correct the last bit of my resume. I don't have a doctor in DRR, so I don't know where. It's my wife who got a doctor in DRR. So I don't know how our sort of CV sort of mix up. She's going to be very upset if she hears about this. So please correct that. My task today is to look at what's going on the ground. And Tokelau Ocean Acidification Project, there's some work done in 2019 looking at marine assessment and restoration and monitoring in Tokelau. Quickly, I don't have much time. That's Tokelau from space program. So you can barely see the island there. Where it is, what I pointed out in terms of Tokelau in particular, it's well known for like almost 100% renewable energy country. It's the first solar country in the world. That was in 2012. They also, what is fascinating about Tokelau is like we did greenhouse gas inventory, and we find that there's a total of 4.30 gigatons of CO2 equivalent, which is contributing about 0.005% of New Zealand gross emissions. So it's barely nothing there in terms of like the emissions, and yet the people are determined to do all they can on the climate change issue. So it's a really good country as a lead. Examples of how to do work. So that's sort of the details there. The challenge for Tokelau, I don't need to go through. It's already, all of you around here probably know about ocean acidification and the links to climate change, so I'm not going to do that, repeat what I've got on the slides. But that was taken out of the IPCC recent AR6 assessment. What's Tokelau's response to climate change? We have what we call LIVC, living with change. And what us in Tokelau believe is not just climate change, it's all changes taking place that will determine the future of the way that we deal with climate change. And specifically for ocean acidification, in the implementation plan is what we have, climate resilience investment pathway. That's where it deals with increased resilience to climate change and ocean acidification. So here are the atolls, the three main atolls of Tokelau. The closest one to Samoa is Whakaofo, and then the middle one is Nukunonu, and then the furthest west is Atafu. By the way, there's no airports on the island. You have to take a boat. It takes about 40 hours from Samoa to cover the whole free atoll. I've done it a few times, and it's pretty challenging. The assessment that was carried on in Tokelau in 2019 look at all the free islands. So there were like 36 sites identified. I'm not going to go through all the results of the 36 sites that was done. I'll just focus on the bigger island of Whakaofo, where a lot of the work that was been done. 19 of the sites were based in Whakaofo. So those, the one with the yellow circle on it are the sites. So some of the sites are inside the lagoon, and the other one is outside of the lagoon. And it was really, really good from a scientific perspective and assessment, because it provides us with what's going on, sort of driven by human-induced activities, and sort of the ocean side is very much natural. So you'll see the difference in terms of identifying the sources. Fortunately for the ocean acidification project, Tokelau already had what they call the 2024 survey and resource management plan. So each of the atoll will already identify what sort of the percentage of corals, those that have been dead, corals, and so forth, so that you have the baseline to measure how far they move since 2004. So this is the process that we'll go through. Why do coral restoration matters? Because corals were under stress. Corals gives ecosystem services. Coral will survive because we can. The next one is how are sites selected? So I'm not going to go into details in the paper, but you need good circulation, some loss of corals, point source stressor, low to moderate macroalgae, moderate coral algae, and access and exposure. So those are the criteria that drives the selection of the sites. So the fun site coming now, slides, is the lagoon site, and was done November 28 to December the 12th, 2019. And here is the first location that was used. And it's basically what it does is it shows that it's not recommended for any work done based on the criteria that was selection, because there were insufficient source and overhanging and shading, and only 10% of the coral cover on patch reefs. The second site is the same thing. It's not recommended per se to get it done. It's because insufficient source of coral, and then overhangs and shading, and only 10% of the coral cover on patch reefs. So I'll skip this to, so now on the ocean side, what is interesting, I'm only going to show a few sites. It's not recommended because reefs does not need planting. So what was pointing out in the study is like they are really in good health. So it's fortunate that we know which locations are already good health, so that we don't need to focus on them. And that's the same with the second site as well. It's basically pointing out they are healthy as it is now, which is great. But it raises the question is whether global climate change or local anthropogenic changes that will drive the difference. We don't know that much. So the results we already talked about is the site selection, site assessment, ecosystem and health measures. So the key conclusion from the work is like the terms of reference call for coral restoration to enhance reef resilience. Is this resilience to coral bleaching and ocean acidification so that heat stress and low pH do not further reduce coral cover? Or is it resilience to both global and local disturbance events such that fisheries productivity and other ecosystem services are maintained and afterwards. The answer from the study shows that both heat, stress, and low pH resistance and diversity are important. And that is why the focus of coral restoration will be on varieties that are rare but formerly abundant. So finally, I just quickly show how the community engagement, we really believe that the future lies with our children and their children. They're going to determine how it works. So we have a poster competition, and these are some of the posters for you all. And finally, one of our worker in the ministries sort of give a really good final thought about all this. As we draw near towards the end of our project, which is the Pacific Partnership on Ocean Acidification, thanks to New Zealand and Monaco government, we hope and pray that opportunities will continue to open up through you, our amazing partners, in the future to keep the momentum going for our oceans in Tokelau. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Dr. Lafale, from that really empowering perspective of how Tokelau is not just only doing excellent ocean acidification, but is really bringing the community engagement and showing the real relevance of ocean acidification to people's lives in the Pacific. To continue on that theme, unfortunately, Ambassador Satyendra Prasad has been called into official meetings, but that's the nature of COP. We're all here to work. But we do have Mr. Ijar Ali, who is the Ocean Officer for Climate Change and International Cooperation in the Ministry of Economy in the Government of Fiji, and is the driving force behind the Commonwealth Blue Charter Action Group on Ocean and Climate Change. So over to you, Ijar.
Thank you, Nick. Ladies and gentlemen, first of all, apologies from my permanent representative to the United Nations, Ambassador Satyendra Prasad. He couldn't be here today. And thank you for that very nice introduction to me, Nick. I will try and do justice to the excellent lineup of panelists that we have here with their many years of dedication to this very important theme, which is ocean acidification, not for only the people of the Pacific, but for the people of the entire world. Excellencies, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, Bula Vinaka, and a very good morning to you all. The need to understand ocean acidification and its impacts on marine ecosystems is well recognized globally as part of the UN Sustainable Development Goal SDG 14.3, including through the work of the IPCC and the Commonwealth Blue Charter, through the amazing work of New Zealand as the chair. At the regional level, the Pohnpei Ocean Statement calls for investments in science and research to minimize and address the impacts of ocean acidification. The framework for Pacific Oceanscape further recognizes the need for assessment of emerging issues such as ocean acidification and the immediate action and effective coordination that is needed to address these issues. The ocean, as pointed out earlier by Ambassador Peter Thompson, has taken up between 20 to 30% of total anthropogenic CO2 emissions since the 1980s, escalating ocean acidification even further. Open ocean surface pH has declined by a very likely range of 0.017 to 0.027 pH units per decade since the late 1980s. Ocean acidification is thus not a new term, certainly not for the people of the Pacific. It is in fact very relevant to the UNFCCC. The adverse impact and effects of climate change has had significant deleterious effects on the composition, resilience, and productivity of natural and managed ecosystems, which are natural sinks for GHG emissions. While we can advocate safeguarding the health of the ocean through stronger commitment to curtailing anthropogenic GHG emissions, there is also a critical need to contribute collectively and in partnership to enhance ocean health and providing adaptation and mitigation solutions. This requires training and upskilling of local people to collect and share data on the current state of the ocean, to predict the effects of ocean acidification on local ecosystems, and to enact mitigation and adaptation strategies. Understanding ocean acidification and its regional impacts is therefore a priority for PCIDS. This has been recognized by many Pacific Island governments, such as the incredible work that Tokelau has done, including Fiji, who has recently identified ocean acidification as a threat to marine resources and food security in our national ocean policy. Ladies and gentlemen, what we need, however, is data, information, and new knowledge to understand the functional parameters of the ocean and to reduce risk and climate change impacts. Ocean acidification data remains lacking in the region, and knowledge generation and data sharing is crucial to directly inform stakeholder decision-making and policy development in Pacific SIDS. In Fiji, ocean acidification monitoring through the Blue Carbon Restoration Project is led by the University of the South Pacific in Vitilevu Bay, RA. About 6,000 mangrove seedlings were planted as part of the project to assess mitigation of ocean acidification through mangrove restoration. In addition, the Commonwealth Marine Economics Program project, in collaboration with the University of the South Pacific, has ongoing monitoring outside of the Suva Harbor, which is our capital. Data from this site has been submitted and is hosted on the SDG 14.3.1 data portal. Furthermore, the Ocean Foundation, in partnership with the Pacific Partnership on Ocean Acidification, donated ocean acidification monitoring kits to 7 Pacific Island countries. Training workshops on ocean acidification analysis has also been conducted in Fiji, attended by regional participants. Some countries have now initiated ocean acidification monitoring activities, but long-term monitoring is lacking, except, however, in Palau, which has taken significant steps towards monitoring ocean acidification within its domestic waters. To further advance this work, a regional training hub is being established to provide training and technical support on ocean acidification monitoring capacity in the Pacific. The hub, which will be managed by the Secretariat of the Pacific Community in partnership with the University of the South Pacific. The hub provides a great opportunity to elevate ocean acidification knowledge and action throughout the Pacific. The hub will, firstly, host regional trainings to develop and support regional expertise in ocean acidification and other ocean variables with the Global Ocean Acidification Observing Network in a box kits. House and maintain research equipment, including spare parts, for training researchers on ocean acidification, monitoring in the Pacific Islands, including distribution. It will also provide ongoing training support for the monitoring programs in the Pacific Islands through a mentor-mentee approach of mentoring. Support data collection and ocean acidification monitoring activities, ocean acidification management in collaboration with NIWA, Otago, and the University of the South Pacific. And finally, will ensure ocean acidification monitoring data from the region is made accessible through established ocean acidification data portals. Ladies and gentlemen, to end, As we face the difficulties of the impacts of the climate on our ocean, the regional efforts and those of Fiji, Tokelau, New Zealand, and many more countries will be critical in ensuring that we are able to adapt and mitigate these challenges on our marine environment. Partnerships are key and crucial to our ocean acidification work, but we need genuine partnerships that are collaborative, equitable, and promote co-learning and capacity building among partners. Thank you very much. Minako Vakalevu.
Thank you very much, Mr. Ali. Now I come to the final member of our panel today, Professor Steve Widdicombe, who is an expert in marine ecology and biodiversity. Over the past 30 years, he's used both experiments and field observations to study how marine organisms and ecosystems respond to a variety of human and natural disturbances. For the last 20 years, his research has explored the impacts of climate change and ocean acidification. He is Director of Science at the Plymouth Marine Laboratory in the UK, and in January 2021, he became a co-chair for the Global Ocean Acidification Observing Network, GOA-ON. He co-leads the UN Ocean Decade endorsed program Ocean Acidification Research for Sustainability, OARS. We saw him on the video earlier. He's now going to come and speak to us. So Steve, over to you.
Great. Thank you very much, Nick. Okay, have the presentation. Here we go. Thank you very much. I'm going to take these off a minute because I like listening to myself. Okay, well, final presentation of the day. As you've heard an awful lot about GOAN, I'm going to tell you a little bit more about how we organize ourselves and how science and the science community is self-organizing to bring together this important information to help support real outcomes and real change. So what is ocean acidification? Perhaps we should have started with this. We've talked a lot about ocean acidification, but we've heard various figures. We've heard that 30% of the CO2 that we've emitted into the atmosphere hasn't stayed there, it's entered the oceans. Now, whilst that's been a good thing for reducing the amount of atmospheric warming, it hasn't been such a great thing for our oceans. By dissolving into the seawater, the carbon dioxide actually creates an acid, and that acid has lots of effects that we're going to find out about in a minute. Is it actually happening? Well, yes, it really is happening, and we've observed it over the last 20 years in long-term observations, where we've seen it in numerous sites around different ocean basins, that ocean acidification is actually real, it's actually happening, and we can see it happening in front of our eyes. What does it do? Well, it increases the amount of CO2 that's dissolved in the seawater. It increases marine acidity, which is measured by the hydrogen ions, which is actually results in a lower pH. And also it goes around mopping up these carbonate ions, and carbonate ions are very important, which I'll see on the next slide. Chemical changes are all well and good in the ocean, but really what we're interested in is what are the impact on the marine ecosystems and the organisms that provide lots of the goods and services that we rely on. CO2 is a natural part of many biological systems. So any changes in the level of CO2 are going to have implications on biological organisms. There are many biological processes and reactions which are pH sensitive. We know enzyme activities are pH sensitive. So you change the pH, you're going to change the way in which marine organisms and the processes in them work. We've also talked about calcium carbonate, a really important element in the ocean. In fact, that many marine organisms use calcium carbonate to create their structures, to create their protective shells. You wouldn't have coral reefs without calcium carbonate, you wouldn't have mollusks, you won't have crustaceans. So all of these factors, all these different chemical changes are having a real biological effect in front of our eyes. The global science community recognized the perils of ocean acidification, and also realized it was a global problem and we needed to come together as a global community to create these partnerships that you've spoken so eloquently about earlier. We really need to mobilize our joint efforts. So in 2012, the Global Ocean Acidification Observing Network, GOON, was formed. And now in 2021, we represent 860 individual members of the network across 105 countries. And we come together around 3 shared goals. Firstly, it's about quantifying and understanding the chemical changes and the trends and the rates of those chemical changes all across the world, from the open oceans to the coastal zones, the highly dynamic coastal zones where many of our goods and services are. Our second goal is to quantify and understand the biological impacts, the consequences of those chemical changes. And the third goal is about being able to make robust and reliable projections and forecasts of what the chemical changes and the biological impacts are going to be into the future, which will hopefully then allow us to adapt and mitigate those changes, and also see if some of the actions we take are having the beneficial effects that we hope. As we've seen, ocean acidification is a global phenomenon, but it's not a uniform phenomenon. Many parts of our planet are experiencing much more rapid ocean acidification than others. You can see here the Arctic, which we talked about earlier, but also some of the coastal upwelling systems, which are highly productive systems, are at the forefront of rapid ocean acidification change. So while it's clear that we need to act as a global community, it's also clear we need this regional coordination and networking so we can address issues that are specifically relevant to the stakeholders in those regions. To do this, GOAN forms regional hubs, and we have 8 regional hubs at the moment, spanning pretty much most of the regions of the planet. There is a new hub being formed which will cover Southern Asia, based in India. But as you can see, we have networks based at a regional level addressing regional issues. So that's great. GOAN has this international network. We're out there, we're monitoring, we're supporting, we're trying to help generate ocean acidification data. But that's not enough. It's not enough to just produce this information. Information doesn't create outcomes, it supports them. But what we need to do is make sure that the scientific evidence that we produce generates real outcomes of change. The 10-year program, OARS, the UN Ocean Decade Endorsed Program, takes GOAN from an observing network to a network that's looking to generate outcomes. The kinds of things we want to be able to have achieved after 10 years is we want high quality, high quantity, and high resolution ocean acidification data wherever it is needed. We want to be able to use that data to support mitigation and adaptation strategies. We want to ensure that the long-term ocean observing systems are co-designed with those stakeholders that need them. We want to ensure that the risks and severity of ocean acidification impacts on marine organisms and ecosystems are fully understood and appreciated. And hopefully that will help us support and protect marine life into the future. We need societally relevant projections and predictions of ocean acidification. It's very good having ocean basin scale predictions of mean pH, but what does that mean for coral reefs in a particular area or areas of upwelling systems? We want a public that is ocean acidification literate. By speaking to the public and allowing them to understand the issues allows them to engage effectively with the solutions. And we want to know that countries and regions will actually use the information we produce to reduce ocean acidification and account for it in their respective national legislation. So in that way, we actually reach out to governments, national bodies, and partners to help us achieve those outcomes, because it's not something we can do as scientists on our own. We call for long-term support for national and regional networks of monitoring and observations. We would like to see investment in future R&D to enhance and increase ocean capability, observing capability, and data generation. We need to democratize the process of collecting ocean acidification data. which means we need to invest in capacity building and training to broaden and democratize this data generation and application and interpretation and understanding. We need to ensure that the data doesn't disappear into black holes and is only accessible to a few. Ocean acidification data needs to be accessible to all those that need to use it. And what we also want to have is effective use of this data and knowledge to underpin policy decisions and political legislation. As you can see, this is not something we scientists can do on our own. So we come back to the concept of partnerships. Partnerships between scientists, between stakeholders, between decision makers, so that we can address ocean acidification and implement real-world solutions to this challenge. Thank you.
Thank you, Steve. And I should say, Steve and I worked together for many years, and really sort of appreciate his insights on all aspects of ocean acidification science. We now have heard from all our panelists. We're just going to have time for a quick round of questions, and because we have to sort of wrap this up by 10:30. I'm actually just going to come to all of you with the one question, and if you could just take a couple of minutes each on that. And that is, what would you say is the one key thing that the action groups of ocean acidification, ocean observations, and ocean and climate change need to prioritize now to see these outcomes that Steve was just talking about? Over to you first, Toby.
Is this working? Thanks. Thanks very much to all the speakers. I found everyone's presentation really interesting. The single biggest thing, there is never a single silver bullet. It's always about multi-layered responses. And I think that was Steve's point, that really this is about partnerships and making sure that we get the right partners on board. And certainly in terms of the work that the action group has been doing in producing the policymakers handbook has been about trying to broaden the base of people who understand this issue and are capable of engaging with it in a policy way. We've tried to produce a handbook which allows what is ultimately pretty technical to be accessible to those on the ground who are making the big policy decisions and building the legislation which can respond in an effective way. So short answer, partnerships, and I think Steve said having a literate population understanding the issue.
That's to Scott, if she's still available online there.
Yes, can you hear me? I can start the video.
Yes, we can hear you. Fantastic.
Yeah, I second Mr. Fisher said, communication is key, I think. Communication with local communities, indigenous communities, public, general, how important and how serious ocean acidification issues are. And at the same time, with the policymakers, as a scientist, we haven't been very good at it, but we are getting better with activities through GOON and ORS, but still, I think we really need to enhance communication with various levels.
Yeah, thank you, Kimiko. And now, Panahuro.
Just one word, data.
Data. Okay.
And having free and unrestricted exchange of data internationally. So we have a really good data policy. Without the data, all the basis of our work is not going to work.
Thank you.
Yeah, thanks, Nick. And I'm just going to share the sentiments by Pene and Toby and Dr. Kimiko as well. Communication, data, And probably the third, and I'm putting this forward, and I believe my colleagues will agree with me, is the importance of integrating traditional environmental knowledge, something that we of the Pacific are quite familiar with, into ocean acidification. Our people have been living off the ocean and have been with the ocean since time immemorial, and probably most of our elders in the village and coastal communities know a lot more, and this information has not fully been tapped into. It is a vital resource that I believe our policy mechanisms and our science should really use. That's it. Thanks.
Steve.
Completely agree. All of the above. Co-development is key for solutions to allow them to work. But I would also add one more thing, and that's speed. The OARS program is a 10-year program, but for some of these communities and ecosystems, they don't have 10 years. So we need to act now. We need to get on with it. Sometimes the solutions won't be perfect, but sometimes we need to act.
Thank you very much. So we have partnerships, communication, data, code design, speed, and traditional knowledge all need to be brought together. I would add one more. We need finance to support all that. You know, this is not just something we can do unsupported. So
I thought we were going to be in the first meeting in the entire COP that didn't mention finance.
Won't get away with it here. Thank you very much for tuning in online and for being in the audience here live with us to listen to our presentations. I would just say we've got time for probably one or two questions from the audience, if anybody has any. Yes, over the back there. We've got a roving mic.
Thank you very much indeed. Thank you. Jonathan Turner, NLA International Blue Economy Solutions business in the UK here. This might not be a fair question, Toby, but please let me ask it and tell me off if it's not fair. A few years ago, New Zealand conveyed legal status, legal personality on a river. And I wondered if there was transposable learning from that could be applied to the territorial waters to help raise the status of the waters of New Zealand and other nations, and thereby start to draw down on funds in a different way and raise the profile of the issues in a different way, and protect the ocean space in a different way. Is that a fair question to ask of you?
It's a great question to ask. It's a wonderful question. I have no idea what the answer is. But you're right. New Zealand conveyed legal status on the Wanganui River, and it has had some significant impacts on the ability to protect that river, provided it could be done consistently with the UN Convention on the Law of the Sea. And I note you were just talking about territorial waters. It's a good idea. It's one that's worth exploring.
Fantastic. Okay, time for one more question if anybody has any. Yes, over in the back there.
Hello everyone. Good morning, speakers. My name is Kim Allen from PNG in the Pacific, and I would like to. There's media reports on Japan's nuclear radioactive waves into the Pacific Ocean, and what is the Commonwealth's role, or even the international community, especially speaking of territorial waters and respect to sovereignty in the oceans. The Pacific lives depends on the oceans. What is the approach to this? Thank you.
Anna, do you want to? Anybody got? No. From Commonwealth perspective, you know, the ocean requires us all to cooperate together on sharing data, as you said, on making sure science is available. There's capacity there to do the science, to understand these issues. You know, we all have concerns about things going on in the ocean, and making sure we've got the data to back it up, that we are putting that data forward to inform policy, that policy is made in an evidence-based way, is critical. And that's what the Blue Charter Action Groups are about. So you know, I think, you know, that needs to be the consistent approach throughout the UN Decade of Ocean Science as well, and really look forward to seeing more investment, more effort on capacity building throughout the Commonwealth on ocean sciences, ocean observing capacity, ocean acidification, and monitoring the effects of climate change, as well as the measures we take to adapt to it and showing their effectiveness as we go forward over the next decade. So, thank you.
Sorry, can I just stress? Thank you for the question. I believe you mentioned nuclear waste. So I think this, I believe my other panelists have mentioned this as well. So the ocean, as you know, incredible, significantly large space, and we are still trying to understand a lot of its processes. Taking into consideration that Japan and the current the oceanic systems and how that nuclear waste will actually impact the Pacific is still something that we have yet to go into. The impacts are widespread, and believe you me, that the countries in the Pacific, we do not have access to data, as mentioned by my colleagues already. That is something that we are researching into. You probably might know that we've explored more on space than we have of the oceans. So you can understand how much we still need to do. Thanks.
Thank you, Azar. And so on that note, it's my pleasure to wrap up this event. So thank you very much for tuning in, for joining us in person. This is a Commonwealth Blue Charter event in the Commonwealth Pavilion at Cop26. We have shared values for a shared ocean. Thank you very much.
Good morning, Mr. Chairman.
Good morning, sir. How are you?
We are fine, thank you. We were just checking if Ms. Alacha Fisher is also here.
Hi, apologies. We're going to have to mute both of you just because we're live on the stream. Could I get you to direct your questions to the chat, please?
Okay, but I think we start the official session in how many minutes?
In 22 minutes. If you could just direct your questions to the chat, please.
No, there is no question for me, Alici. Is that I was checking the internet connection. So I have nothing. I'm one of the panelists. So all is fine with me.
Thank you.
So I will mute until we start in 20 minutes. Thank you.
Good morning, good afternoon, good evening. For all of you joining us either live at this event or in Glasgow or remotely from around the world. Is the sound coming through okay? Can you hear me through your headphones okay? Yes, it's all coming through the headphones? That's fantastic, thank you. And panelists, you can hear through? I think the back. They should be, yeah. Good. So, thank you. Today, we're going to be launching a very important resource for the acceleration of the energy transition in small island developing states, or as we like to call them, large ocean states. And we're going to be hosting an investor roundtable for the Republic of Seychelles as well. To start this event, it's my great delight to welcome our high-level panel. To the right of me here, the Commonwealth Secretary General, the Right Honourable Patricia Scotland, QC. We also have the Minister of Finance of the Republic of the Seychelles, the Honourable Nadir Hassan, and the CEO and Special Representative of the UN, Secretary General for Sustainable Energy for All, and the Co-Chair of UN Energy, Ms. Damalola Ngunbi. So, without any further ado, I'm just going to invite our high-level panelists to come and give their remarks, just in the order I've just introduced them. And over to you, Secretary General.
Good morning, everyone. I hope you can hear me. Minister, Excellencies. It is a real pleasure to be with you this morning. And I'm actually going to start with a very warm and profound thank you. The first 2 days have been moving at COP, because I think many of us came to COP hoping but fearful about what we would actually see. The reality that we face, particularly for the small developing island states, the big blue ocean states, is that we are now seriously at code red. Many of us have seen the painful reality of what being on the front line of the war on climate change not only looks like, but feels like. We've seen our homes destroyed, our families and our livelihoods absolutely annihilated. And we wonder whether the world will hear us. Well, in the last 2 days, it looks as if maybe they've heard the code red message. But the big question for us is, so that is hope and that is aspiration, but what are we actually going to do? Because today is all about action. And if I may, I would like to thank not only the panelists, but everyone here today. Because as a result of your coming, you are committing yourselves to being the solution that we need to make. And energy is a huge part of what we must now do. So with the rest of the world, the Commonwealth families are facing challenges in relation to the global warming caused by the increased emissions of greenhouse gases, 2/3 of which emanate from the production and the use of energy. Many developing countries also have significant energy access gaps, and expanding energy access is a priority for sustainable development. We were talking earlier about the inequalities that currently exist. If you are paying 44 cents for 1 unit of energy, how can you compete with those countries who maybe pay 2 or 3 cents? That's the reality that many of our countries face. So recognition continues to grow of the need for a new, ambitious target in current efforts and to ramp up the current efforts to decarbonize and transform the global energy system. Of the 38 countries classified by the UN as small island developing states, 25 are in our Commonwealth. And despite significant clean energy resource potentials, our SIDS are characterized by their heavy dependence on imported fossil fuels that result in some of the highest electricity costs in the world and significantly disrupts our supply chain with huge challenges, putting pressure on already strained economies. Furthermore, as a result of the ongoing COVID-19 crisis, that has increased increased our vulnerabilities. So SIDS, in varying degrees, have highlighted the need to transition towards clean energy and to increase the energy security and economic resilience. And to address this challenge, the Commonwealth Secretariat, under the Commonwealth Sustainable Energy Transitions Agenda and Sustainable Energy for All, have jointly developed a toolkit to assist SIDS develop business cases and strategies to facilitate investment in clean energy projects, particularly in the power sector. And the toolkit will be utilized to develop country-specific business cases that detail the cost-benefit analysis and strategies needed to just unlock the investment and guide the formulation of recommendations that seek to maximize the socio-economic and climate benefits of a clean strategy pathway. And to support the launch of the toolkit, the partners determined that this was important to validate the efficacy of the toolkit by commissioning a country business case, which would include verified and validated data and identify the investment grade opportunities in the country's power sector. And I'm really so grateful to the Seychelles, because the Seychelles are going to be the exemplar where we get to taste it and see whether it works. And we are delighted that Seychelles once again is stepping up to this plate and are fully engaged in this project and they've been engaged from the very, very start and have expressed early interest in utilizing the toolkit, allowing it to be readily available as the country business case. And the investor roundtable to follow this launch will convene a panel of financial institutions and development partners. We've got ARENA, we've got the Green Climate Fund, we've got Bloomberg New Energy Finance, who are here with us this morning to discuss the Seychelles country business case, and more broadly, the strategies that we're going to need to unlock the finance for clean energy sector in SIDS. And we're currently at progressing phase 2 of the project, which involves the production of a data bank of basic country data on clean energy investment landscape for each Commonwealth small island developing state. And once this is completed, we plan to host the toolkit on an accessible platform for all our Commonwealth SIDS. And we really welcome the future collaboration from all our partners with our other partners in C4All on this important project, engaging with everyone to make sure that we deliver the support that our member states really need and we unlock the much needed finance for their clean energy sector. And I can't tell you how excited I am that we are doing this. When we started on this journey in 2016, saying that we wanted to create a regenerative model of development to respond to this climate crisis, many of you here will remember that some said we couldn't do it. I believed we could. But what I knew was none of us could do it on our own, but we can do it together. And so today, when we launch this toolkit, this is our saying, oh yes, we can. And I want to thank you for being part of the solution and absolutely not part of the problem. So thank you very much.
The Right Honourable Patricia Scotland, QC, the Commonwealth Secretary General, Ms. Damilola Ogunbiyi, CEO and Special Representative of the UN Secretary General for Sustainable Energy for All, and Co-Chair of the UN Energy. Distinguished invitees, ladies and gentlemen, very good morning to you all. It is a distinct honor for me, on behalf of the government and the people of the Republic of Seychelles, to be invited to deliver the keynote message at this Cop26 side event on the unlocking clean and affordable and reliable electricity. At the outset, I would like to thank the Commonwealth and C4All for organizing this event and also choosing Seychelles as the case study for the toolkit. We have today an excellent opportunity to discuss the development of renewable energy and the transformation of energy sector to low carbon, and to encourage our friends, development partners, donors, and supporters to answer our call to action. The world is now on a mission to put into actions the many words spoken over the years. For small island developing states like the Seychelles, this means using a source of renewable energy that can support us in transforming our energy sector, which will require huge amounts of energy as well as financing. Seychelles is well renowned for its beauty and its effort to protect its environment. With a population of approximately 96,000, Seychelles is the smallest African country in terms of both area and population, and is categorized as the most developed country in Africa. However, due to our small size and economic development in recent years, we are unable to access concessionary resources and financing. It is a huge dilemma for us. Energy access, energy security, adequate and reliable supply and affordability are extremely vital for sustainable growth. I cannot stress enough that there is an urgent need for us to prepare for the future. And unless we invest in developing and exploiting renewable energy sources today, we might face a situation where we become victims of severe energy shortages. The cost of transitioning at that point may be beyond our means. The call for action is now. For this reason and others, Seychelles is looking beyond its 15% renewable energy target by 2030. We have set our ambition much higher, and we are actively exploring the possibility of going 100% renewable energy. We are the first to admit the challenge is great, and the task ahead is daunting, but this has strengthened our resolve to take up this challenge. We are proud as a young nation of what we have achieved, but above us hangs a very dark cloud. Climate change is real. We are already experiencing it. Whether it is sea level rise in the Maldives, flooding in Mauritius, coastal erosion in Comoros, or Cyclone Fentala in Seychelles, there is no mistake. Our existence as independent nations is at risk. We have no other option but to kick our addiction to fossil fuel. We must explore the golden opportunities renewable energy presents for not only strengthening energy security, but also for the provision of clean, affordable, and sustainable energy to combat climate change. This critical role of renewable energy are being re-emphasized in this Cop26. We, countries of the world, one world, need to commit to the decarbonization of the global economy by reducing and gradually phasing out the use of fossil fuels. On our part, Seychelles have made significant advances in the renewable energy, particularly wind energy and solar PV. Today, to the wind farm in the harbor, we are saving over $1 million on expenditure of fuel per year. We have more than 5 megawatt distributed PV generation capacity spread across both residential and commercial sector. We have 6 megawatt utility scale PV system like on Ile Romainville, and I am pleased to say that we have an ongoing 5 megawatt floating PV plant on marine environment, which is on track to be the first utility scale PV marine plant in Africa. Notwithstanding government's commitment and enthusiasm for renewable energy, it is the government's top priority to explore new ways and means for our country to become the more resource efficient. Increasing our efficiency complements our commitment to renewable energy. Every increase in efficiency means that we use less fuel, which translates into monetary savings for the country. We are fully aware that despite having the technologies, the integration of renewable energy to the grid in particular, variable sources is very challenging, even more so for isolated systems such as those in island countries. The need to strengthen energy security is equally as important as ensuring adequate, efficient, reliable, and affordable supply. Variable renewable energy will have an impact on grid stability, so it is crucial to know how much the grid can take and what are the options if we want to go beyond the limit. To conclude, I wish that the deliberations at this workshop will be positive and fruitful, as we have much to gain by sharing experiences and ideas with each other. Shaping the future of clean and sustainable energy is a collective effort, and I am sure together we will make it happen. We will need cooperation like never before. I hope all of you will benefit from this event. Thank you.
Secretary General, Honorable Ministers, Your Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, thank you for listening to me today. I think we started up really well with the motivational speech that we got from the Secretary General to really dimension what the issues are. And then we have the Seychelles, which is saying, look, we've already started this journey and we're ready for business and we need funding. I want to bring in another angle. I want to bring in the fact that we're living in a world that it isn't just and it isn't inclusive and it's not equitable when we think about energy. So the continent I'm from in Africa, especially sub-Saharan Africa, if you remove South Africa, has an installed capacity of 81 gigawatts. That's the same energy as you have for the country of Germany. So 1 billion people are born energy poor. You're already born into energy poverty without any means of your own. That's just what actually happens. And this is what we're trying to correct. We're trying to say that the SIDS in particular, energy transition, can be clean from the start. We don't have to come back in 10 and 20 years and transition and use all the polluting fuels that frankly are being used by the developed world. We can start clean now. And the SIDS are also ready for business. The policies are there, the toolkits are there. But what is frankly needed, and I'm a very blunt person, is financing. When people tell me we don't know where the money is going to come from, frankly, I get very upset because we are going through a pandemic and the global north found 15 trillion of less than 1% money in a period of 1 year. So the money is there. The money to subsidize, the money to grant mysteriously appears when it affects the developed world. And now what we're trying to say that is critical for the SIDS to just survive. This money that we're talking about is not a gift. This is investment. These are opportunities. This is gender that is going to be transformed in these economies. And the economic development of these countries cannot happen without adequate energy. It has never happened to any other region in the world. It's not going to happen to Africa, and it's definitely not going to happen in the SIDS. So I just want us to treat this as it's not a handout, it's not a favor. It is what we should be doing because they're the victims of climate change that has not been caused by these regions and definitely not by these islands. So as we speak today, it's not about, there's always like 10,000 different financial instruments that everybody comes up with. What is the financial instrument for the Seychelles? How is it going to come without 24 to 36 months of negotiations to get to final close before you do any project? I think we need to be truthful about the reality of when not saying the finance is available, but how do you access the finance? Because at the end of the day, you want to serve the people. The people deserve to have these things. You need to uplift people out of poverty, which is frankly what the UN stands for. And of course, what the Commonwealth has been driving all this time. It is all in our favor to really focus on this region. What this has shown us is that climate change can't just happen in the global north. It has to happen everywhere. And if it doesn't happen everywhere, everybody's at risk. So I guess my plea with you today is let's really take this seriously. Let by the next time we go to the next COP, we're talking about the projects we've done in the Seychelles, not about the projects we're negotiating in the Seychelles. This is very, very important. It's important that Seychelles are seeing that you can do these in the SIDS. It is attractive enough. And, frankly, because I'm from such a big country, it's the perfect size to have some of these very transformative solar and wind solutions. So I just want to say thank you again for listening to me today. I'm looking forward to the feedback for all the other panels and anything we can do in terms of the UN system to continuously support the Secretariat and the countries. Please get in touch with myself and my team. Thank you so much for listening to me.
Thank you very much, Your Excellencies, Secretary General, Minister Hassan, and Mugunbi. It is now my pleasure to proceed to the next item on the agenda, which is the presentation of the toolkit by Ms. Alache Fisho, who is our lead on sustainable energy at the Commonwealth Secretariat, and is going to talk to you about this today, along with Mr. Rajneesh Sharma, who's the Director for Deloitte India and lead consultant on the design and development of the toolkit. So, Alache, over to you.
Thanks, Nick. Can I just add my thanks to all of the speeches that have been made, to everyone who has made time to participate in this event. And I'm speaking here on behalf of the Commonwealth Secretariat and Sustainable Energy for All Technical Working Team. We're very pleased to be launching this toolkit, which was designed jointly under a joint project between the two organizations. The primary objective of this toolkit is to support small island developing states to develop business cases and strategies that would facilitate investment in clean energy projects, particularly in the power sector. We've heard about the figures that Ms. Ogumbi shared about just the massive gap that there is in energy access across most of sub-Saharan Africa. So what we want to do with this toolkit is to support countries, particularly SIDS, to translate their clean energy transition plans into investable business opportunities. The business cases that will be developed using the toolkit are expected to identify the scale of investment required for and the value that will be generated by an inclusive energy transition. The toolkit evaluates different scenarios, starting with the business as usual case, looks at existing government plans for transitions, and then an accelerated transition scenario that would achieve 100% renewable energy by 2030. It also evaluates existing and future challenges, including, of course, the impact of COVID-19, the economic and social benefits, jobs, climate benefits, access to jobs, health, etc., and key enablers, in particular, as Ms. Ogumbi so clearly elucidated, the finance and international support that's required for the energy transition is explored in using the toolkit. Factors such as remoteness, limited skill often mean that renewable energy projects can be more expensive in small island developing states. So the strategies that are being developed using the toolkit will seek to address some of these factors. For example, it will clearly identify solutions such as improvement or adoption of new policies and regulatory measures that would incentivize sustainable private sector investment, because we do need the private sector funds in the sector to galvanize and drive forward action for growing renewable energy access, renewable energy generation in small island developing states. Each business case is intended to address the following key questions for each SID. What is the current trajectory towards achieving 100% renewable energy by 2030 and net zero emissions by 2050? What are the barriers, the challenges to achieving these targets? What are the expected costs, returns, and the finance that's required for the energy transition and to build climate resilient energy systems? And what are the socio-economic benefits, the GDP impact, jobs creation, local trade, health, climate resilience, etc., and that will be realized through the energy transition? And how do these differ under the different scenarios that I had enumerated above? And we hope that by addressing these questions, the analysis created through the use of the toolkit will provide an objective basis for credible strategies to attract and maximize the value of investment required to accelerate energy transitions in SIDS, to achieve 100%, the goal of 100% renewable energy, and to attract investments consistent with supporting the Recover Better policies and more resilient economic development in small island developing states. I will now hand over the virtual mic to Rajnish, who led the team from Deloitte that supported the design and development of the toolkit. Rajnish will talk us through the technicalities of how the toolkit works and will be on hand. I think he'll be participating remotely. We just go to Rajnish now.
Yes, thank you, Rachel. I hope my audio is good. So while the presentation is getting loaded, thanks for the background on the toolkit. So respected dignitaries as well as participants, I'll make a very brief presentation on what the toolkit is about and how it will be used. Next slide, please. So eventually, we all heard that we are already talking about climate change, renewable energy 100 target for different countries, and within that, we are focusing under this event on a SIDS nation, and especially this toolkit is being developed for small island developing nations. Now, What is the purpose of toolkit? One, obviously, we all are aware that in a lot of small island nations, the cost of electricity is very high. One of the, I think, speakers earlier indicated it's like 44 cents in one of the countries. So definitely from a financial perspective, I mean, if you compare with the current cost of renewable energy electricity generation in other geographies, it looks very, very cheaper, almost I would say 50 to 60% cheaper than that. But the issue which comes is that there is at times not much clarity on the ticket size or how much the capacity each of these SIDS nation will be contributing to in terms of renewable energy. Now, the objective of the toolkit is basically to support the small island nations in their journey towards renewable energy 100 target. Now, the toolkit will act as a one-stop platform per se for policymakers, for investors, lenders, developers, EPC players who are active in this sector to see that how a particular island nation is placed currently in terms of their renewable energy mix and how it is envisaged to move in future. So it will cover aspects like what is the expected trajectory, how they are expected to move in terms of renewable energy, what is the ticket size, the capacity in terms of megawatt for renewable energy technologies we are talking about, the investment requirement, and along with that, the business case we are trying to analyze as a part of this toolkit is to look, okay, this is the capacity which is required, this is the investment, how it is stacked up financially. Is it making any sense for the country to go for RE100? How it is will be viewed by investors as well as lenders in general. So the toolkit will act as a one-stop solution where information across different SIDS nation will be provided. The user can go to the toolkit, they can select a particular country, the data bank will already be there, and it will give a visualization on the country dashboard on, okay, how the country is placed today and the different scenario analysis on, okay, if we go by current trend, where the country is going to achieve. The second important element is whether the country will be able to achieve renewable energy 100 or not by year 2030 and carbon net zero in power sector by year 2050. So I think this is the broader layout for the toolkit. Next slide, please. One of the important elements of the toolkit is to see how different scenarios are stacked for different small island nations. Now, the key question which is in everyone's mind is when can we expect some of these countries to achieve 100% renewable energy? As a part of the toolkit provides 3 scenarios analysis. One is business as usual. Okay, this is more aligned with the current growth of their renewable energy, how much is their fossil fuel, and if we go by the current trend, how and to what level will reach by year 2030 and where will reach by year 2050. That's the business as usual scenario. The second scenario we have analyzed as a part of toolkit is the planned pathway, which is more aligned with the existing policy and regulatory mandates of the government. So it's more aligned that, okay, if we go by the current focus of the government, where will we end up in, say, 2030 and 2050? And the third and the most important scenario, which we are focusing a lot, is on the preferred pathway. How we are going to end up in 2030, whether we'll reach 100%. If we reach 100%, what will be the expected renewable energy mix there in that particular country, as well as by year 2050, whether we'll be able to achieve the net zero emission for in power sector. Now, as a part of this analysis, we are analyzing each of the different SIDS nation. We have looked into their generation profile. We have looked into their renewable energy technology potential also per se, whether they have solar, wind, mix of that, biomass, waste to energy. So the toolkit will provide all these scenarios so so that it's easy for policymakers as well as for investors and lenders as well as developers to see how much is the generation mix of renewable energy we are talking about. And along with that, the capacity in megawatt terms, so that we have a horizon of 5 years, 10 years that, okay, for this country, we are talking about 100 megawatt, 200 megawatt, or 500 megawatt. So I think that's a kind of result we can expect in the toolkit. Next slide. One of the important elements, once we have looked into the overall renewable energy generation mix for a particular island nation, the important elements on, okay, what is the investment required in generation, grid enhancement, and energy storage? We all know with increase in renewable energy, there will be a massive energy transition which will take place in these countries, and will require aspects on renewable energy integration, investment in these elements, as well as energy storage. Because if you're talking about renewable RE100, we have to eventually replace some of those oil-based DG sets. So there we have also analyzed these scenarios as a part of the toolkit that, okay, if a country is moving from say 20% to 50% in next 5 years, how the investment in RE integration as well as energy storage will be stacked up. So that is also being analyzed as a part of the investment requirement. Once the capacity, the renewable energy mix, as well as the investment requirement has been calculated, the other important aspect is on looking into the financial side as well as the economic side. This is more aligned with the business case. Okay, this is good that, okay, a particular country needs this much of renewable energy, whether it makes sense for them. So that has also been analyzed in terms of the savings they will be accruing to on account of replacement of fossil fuel based imports. So a lot of these countries import are oil dependent. So that has also been calculated vis-a-vis the cost of renewable energy generation. Okay, if they invest in renewable energy, this is the cost of generation plus along with the RE integration and energy storage cost, and stacking that, how they are placed in terms of replacing the fossil fuel. So that saving has also been calculated. The toolkit also factors into important element of energy efficiency, because when we talk about carbon emission, one definitely is adding renewable energy, but the other element on energy efficiency has also been analyzed. So next slide, please. So this was more on the financial side. The other elements we are looking is whether on these renewable energy mix, whether the country will be able to meet their SDG 7 goals, electricity access, how it is helping. So I think that kind of business case is also being analyzed, as well as looking into the emissions in power generation, that, okay, if we go in different scenarios, which is business as usual, government current targets. The third one was the RE100, how the emission reduction will take place. That has also been analyzed as a part of the toolkit. Next slide, please. So apart from financial and emission related aspects, socio-economic benefit are also being considered in the toolkit. The idea is, okay, I mean, when we are talking about to policymakers and investors, apart from that ticket size, the investment, and the financial saving, we are also showcasing the socio-economic benefit, which is more around, okay, what is the direct job creation? How much is the avoided forex outflow in due to reduced fossil fuel import? So this has also been analyzed for different scenarios, and other benefits like reduced water usage on account of higher renewable energy. So the toolkit in general analyzes all these aspects, including the socio-economic benefit. Next slide, please. Now, one of the important element I think we all discussed and earlier speakers also highlighted was that, okay, I mean, we have to look into the gaps part also, because we all know financially on a cost of generation basis, it makes sense, but still for SIDS nation, we need to look into some immediate intervention which are actionable also. So as a part of the toolkit, we have done a country-wise mapping also, looking into where the country is placed currently in terms of their institutional, policy, and regulatory aspects also. And based on the benchmarking with the international best practices, depending on their energy transition journey, whether they are at, say, 10% RE or a 50% RE or 100% RE, what kind of interventions will be required. So the toolkit also provides a brief overview on these elements, that okay, these are the areas of intervention, so that policymakers are also aware of that, as well as donors and investors who are keen on analyzing a particular country. So I think with this, I will try to close and say that the toolkit is basically meant for supporting renewable energy transition as well as RE100 target. The idea here is it should benefit different stakeholders, policymakers to investors to developers, EPC players, so that all these small island nations, the information is readily available. We are able to visualize how we can expect the country to evolve in future. With this, I close my presentation. Thank you for the opportunity, and I hand it over back to the moderator. Thank you.
Thank you, Rajneesh. So without further ado, I'd like to introduce Mr. Tony Imadua, who is the CEO of the Seychelles Energy Commission. Tony will be presenting the country business case for the Republic of Seychelles. Tony.
Thank you, Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen. It's a privilege to be here today to present the output from the toolkit. I will start by just showing you a picture of a recently commissioned 2.5 megawatt PV battery hybrid system on one of the outer island, which is currently supplying the island almost 95% on renewable energy. So it's possible. So just a brief, Seychelles basically is seeking to transition to a low carbon sector to address our high dependence on fossil fuel, which is currently at 95%. So 5% of the electricity generation comes from renewable energy, which comprise of 6 megawatt wind farm and 12 megawatt PV, which is basically broken down into almost 5 megawatt distributed PV system and a 6 megawatt utility scale system. Additional information about Seychelles, we rank second in Africa for Human Development Index, third in the Ibrahim Index of Africa Governance, and rank 8 in Africa in the ease of doing business. So more or less paint a picture. Seychelles is ready for investment. We are well situated strategically, and as well as the environment to attract the investors. Seychelles basically set the target for renewable energy at 15% renewable by 2030, but as Minister for Finance said in his speech, we are aiming to go 100% by 2050. We have many policies and plans, but the key ones are basically the NDC, which was recently revised, and it's to reduce the economy-wide absolute GHG emission by 21.4% in 2025 and 29% in 2030. We have the National Energy Policy 2010-2030, which basically set the target of the 50% in 2030, but also the intention to go 100% in the long term. Then also we have the National Climate Change Policy, which basically talks about mainstreaming climate change in all relevant sectors and to achieve a transition to a low carbon economy. And then we have a microgrid master plan, which basically guides the development of renewable energy on the outlying island. And the first picture was one example of project that has been implemented based on this microgrid master plan. In addition to this project, which I previously mentioned, we also are implementing a number of projects to address our dependence on fossil fuel. We're implementing a solar school project with the objective of basically having all the school in Seychelles to have PV system to contribute to the electricity consumption. So far, we've covered all the schools on 2 of the main islands. So now we're moving to on the main island where most of the majority of schools are. We also have a project which we refer to as PV democratization project. So basically this project, we have a group of people, I would say vulnerable people, who's receiving support from government to pay for their bills. Part of this PV democratization, so we offer them a PV system, and the amount of energy generated from the system offset their consumption. So in turn, we save on the money that was going out, and then we can reallocate this funding to other priorities in Seychelles. And now the following slide will be basically some of the output that came out from the toolkit. As mentioned by the previous presenters, we look at different scenarios. There was a business as usual, and then government plan pathway, and as well as a preferred pathway. For this presentation, we will not talk about the business as usual. It's not relevant. We'll focus on the plan pathway, which is basically aligned to the revised NDC and the energy policy. And when we looked at the analysis from the toolkit, it shows that if we continue on the trend as per the NDC and the policy, by 2050 we'll only reach more than 50% of renewable penetration, and not actually achieve the 100% ambition that we want. So the preferred pathway to achieve the 100% by 2050 will require an additional of 454 megawatt of renewable energy between 2021 to 2050. That's quite significant for a small island state. And basically the 100 renewable energy scenarios requires a diverse array mix from solar, wind, waste to energy, definitely energy storage to control the integration of the renewable energy. And of course, it's based also on having excess regeneration capacity. Additionally, for the 100% scenario, the preferred pathway, we will require an investment of nearly $671 million over the period 2021-2050. Significant financial and socio-economic to be generated to provide a strong business case. I mean, additional benefit, $289 million in terms of savings, 572 direct job creation, $353 million of avoided expenditure of the forex earning of the country to import the fuel. It will also result in 31% saving in water that are used for utilization for electricity generation. And as part of the emission reduction, over 0.3 million tons of carbon dioxide per year. To support the whole transition to 100% scenario, it's important that the legal and commercial institutional framework needs to be in place. This is what we call the enabling environment. We have the Energy Act, which makes provision for private sector participation that open up the market for generation. We are currently revising the energy legislation to strengthen the IPP power procurement framework, as well as other requirements that needs to be put in place to make it more attractive for the investors to come in and invest in Seychelles. Additional framework in place, basically, like I said, the legal framework allows for private person to come in and generate, and we are basically going through the independent power producer model approach, which is based mostly on auctioning approach. And then we also have for the small system, which basically look at not sort of a mix between a net metering and a feeding tariff approach to accelerate the deployment of renewable energy on the island. And recently, with the change in government, there is also work being done now to strengthen the institution in Seychelles. So there's quite a lot of number of reform under undergoing in Seychelles with the Ministry of Agriculture, Climate Change and Environment, basically strengthening their policy team. And then we have the Seychelles Energy Commission, which is the regulator. We are transforming into a multi-sector regulator as well, so bringing other services like water and sanitation. And then you have the main utility, PUC, which is very important. The 100% scenarios is crucial that you get the participation of the utility on board. I mean, they are one of the biggest facilitator for this transition. Not having them on board will slow down the process. For investors, opportunities basically that we have in Seychelles, potential areas in the RE generation, solar PV, waste to energy, offshore wind. In terms of infrastructure, RE integration and grid strengthening, you have the enhancement of the grid, battery storage, and even other form of storage which we started looking at. For example, pump storage is one. And then, of course, energy efficiency, the low-hanging fruit, something that we need to do and complements generation as well. So we're looking at creating framework for energy service companies, ESCOs, and also putting in place MEPS, minimum energy performance standards. We're currently reviewing the interim process that we have for MEPS. We're even considering having in place a sort of program for higher energy performance standards as well. So in a way to encourage suppliers to import, equipment, appliances of a higher efficiency. Okay, so in the end, Seychelles is basically looking for partnership. We feel like that investment in renewable energies needs to happen if we want to move. But the problem is sometimes the investment are not geared towards what the country priorities or where the needs are. So that's the important thing, that to have a toolkit that can unlock this form of investment to pinpoint where exactly the funding has to go to. A lot of these small islands, they doesn't really have the capacity or the ability to do that. And we are sometimes at mercy of multilateral or other organizations that come just to tick the boxes rather than providing funding where it is really required. So it's important for as a country to own what we require, what we need, instead of letting the investors or organizations telling you where you need to invest. So for us, it's important that we have some a toolkit, a platform which Commonwealth and RC4All has developed to assist us. Of course, the toolkit depends on what you input, the data. It's very crucial. So for us, it's a dynamic process. It's not something that very static. Is a dynamic process. You need to keep on reviewing it. There might be policies or strategies that are proposed which initially might look workable, but in the end it might not. But at least you have something to assist you to do the analysis and to address it. So basically what we look for is financing through grants, constitutional financing for project, which is basically be undertaken by the government, even the utilities, PUC. But also there are some investors who wants to access, especially local investors in Seychelles, who's getting problem accessing low-cost financing from the commercial, and they want to access. And for us, we believe if we have a market where the private sector takes the ownership in developing the renewable energy, that will move the need for government to come in and provide that financing, and they can focus on other areas which matters more. Then of course we need technical assistance and capacity. That's very crucial. I mean, for example, take the toolkit. It's important that capacity building is involved with regards to the toolkit. We don't want to be in a position that every now we have to go back to Commonwealth or CIS4All to say, okay, can we do analysis? But we also will be part of the process of redoing and reassessing our position with regards to the partnerships. That's one example. So things like also looking at resource assessment, various resources, what are the potential of the seeds, and also investment, direct investment in the clean energy generation, energy storage, ESCOs, which I mentioned. And that concludes. So for any information question that you may have, we'll have a chance to do that after the session. But also there is the Principal Secretary for the Energy Department of the Ministry, Ms. Lalan, and myself. So our contact is there. So you can drop me a line. We can have more discussion. Thank you.
Thank you, Tony, for that excellent and clear presentation. And we'll go right to the next segment of this session, which is the Investor Roundtable. And I invite Ms. Sherry Kennedy of the Sustainable Energy for All, who will be moderating the panel, the Investor Roundtable. Sherry.
Good morning, everyone. It's so great to remove this, even for a few minutes. I'm delighted to be here. My name is Sherry Kennedy, and I'm a director at the Sustainable Energy for All, otherwise known as SE for All. We are thrilled to be part of this initiative because my CEO was just here earlier in the morning, and one of the focus points that we have really is on using data to tell the story, and also equipping countries with these tools so they can steer their own path. So for us, this is clear. It's really important, and that's one of the reasons why we were excited to join the initiative. So we're all here today on Finance Day at COP. Secretary General Antonio Guterres yesterday, he noted that investments in adaptation actually acts as an early warning system. It can save lives, while climate smart agriculture and infrastructure can save jobs. So really what we're talking about today is critical. We know, for example, that in terms of climate finance, currently, only about a quarter of that finance goes towards adaptation, and that's about $20 billion, while we know by 2030, developing countries are going to require in the margins of 300 billion. So there's a huge gap. We need absolutely to reverse this trend, and to do this will require faster and easier access to finance. So our focus today really is on the how of unlocking the financing required for small island developing states. I don't even like to use that term. I think we should look at it as large, as Secretary General mentioned, because size should not be a factor here. It's quite important to note that. So what we want to do today in this panel, and I'm very excited to get started on that, is to focus on this how part. How can we once the case has been made for investments, which has been made this morning, how can countries concretely attract the financing needed? And in turn, how can investors tap into these opportunities? Because there is a business case, there are opportunities for investors. So I would like to start now by introducing our esteemed panel. We have coming in remotely Mr. Ahmed Badir, Director of Project Facilitation and Support at the International Renewable Energy Agency. I'm also honored to have a representative from Green Climate Fund. We now have Monica Goldberg, who is a Senior Renewable Energy Specialist from the Division of Mitigation and Adaptation at the Green Climate Fund. And the Green Climate Fund is an important partner here, as are all our panelists, but I just wanted to point out that Green Climate Fund, they were established in 2010 within the framework of UNFCCC, specifically to help developing countries limit or reduce their greenhouse gas emissions and to adapt to climate change. And they currently have they're the largest fund of their kind, with about $1 billion, I believe now, to help countries struggling with COVID-19 impacts. So really, really important. Love to hear hear from Monica. Luisa De Moro is head of energy transitions and at Bloomberg New Energy Finance. So can I ask you, Luisa, to come because you're in person and join us here? So we're going to hopefully get from you sort of a policy lens as we move into the discussion. And last but not least, I'd like Tony to join us. We've just heard from Tony. He is the CEO of Seychelles Energy Commission. The commission was created following the 2007 and 2008 oil crisis. They have a mission to reduce the country's dependence on foreign fossil fuels, because it's this importing factor as well that is causing the big price crunch. And they also have an expanded mandate now that includes a regulatory function and policy implementation focus. So that rounds off the panel. So what I'd like to do is start with one question for each of the panelists. And then I would like to get Tony's reaction to their responses to those questions. So we can start and see where we are with time. We'll start with that. So the first question I would like to throw out is to Luisa. So Luisa, if you are an investor looking to support the ramping up of renewables in island settings, what more would you want to see from the government?
I think Seychelles is already doing a really good job into implementing what is fundamental. So at BNEF, Bloomberg NEF, we look at starting with emerging market, 137 countries in the world, doing a mapping of where the countries are and how to make those countries attractive for clean energy investment. Unfortunately, we don't cover island nations, maybe yet. We can talk about this later. But one thing that we always flag about how to get started in the energy transition is establishing a target. Not because this is all you need to get there, but because this is the proof of government intention, and it's very important to set a direction. So this is one thing that you got that's important. Second one is reviewing the enabling environment and the policies that will help you get there. In some markets, that includes auctions or feed-in tariffs, but also establishing concrete PPAs and clear PPAs that will allow investors to understand how they're going to get paid. So this is also a first really good step to help investors have clarity on the markets and reduce red tape. One thing that we haven't mentioned, but I've been thinking lately more about, is the challenge that the island nations have is on scaling up, right? So an investor that's going to come in, especially a foreign investor that needs to understand the market, and they are usually interested in next opportunities. So they spend some time understanding the markets, understand how to get started in there, so they can also look forward and understand the next opportunities for investment in the country. One thing that could be considered, and I'm not sure if this is something that's already going on or not, if not, I'm really keen to have a conversation on how that could be implemented or thought about, is how to partner up the islands, and I know there are a lot of complexities around that, to transform those into a potential bigger market for investors. Because then if there is a similar enabling environment, there is similar market reality that not only reduces risk, but allow for replicability, then investment could more easily flow in. And I think with the toolkit and with this work that is being launched today, there's a big opportunity to have a success case that can be replicated in a similar format, and then provide clarity and replicability to foreign investors, and potentially commercial investors. We don't need to get limited to development finance institutions, which are key to kick in a market, but they won't do everything alone. So I think there is a big potential for that. I think you were already doing a great job in kicking it off, and this is really the path to go.
Thank you. I mean, you kind of echoed basically what we are actually, going through in Seychelles currently. I can give the example of the floating PV project, which we tender out, and we try as much as possible to create an environment that will make it comfortable, give confidence to investors. So we did a lot of project design development. So things like doing the EIA, environmental impact assessment, doing some other studies on the environment, identifying, the site, doing the pre-planning procedures. So at least by the time we move to the tender phase, the investors will have something that's already prepared. But also something which is very important. Seychelles is small, and large investors or key players in the sectors really see Seychelles as just a small, and not really, it's like a waste of their time. So, but during the process of the tender of this floating PV, we did try to show that Seychelles can be a stepping stone for your particular project. I mean, if you can really do a PV project in Seychelles and that works, you have the whole ocean for you to tap into, the whole market to tap into. And this is how we sell, the project to the investors. Don't look at Seychelles as just you doing one project. No, if it works in Seychelles, it will definitely work on islands from Pacific, Caribbean, and this is the good thing about small island. The complexity, it has the complexity of large countries, but packed in a small, like Chile, it packs a punch. So if you can make it work in a small island context, it gives you the opportunity to really expand and even come up with innovative projects. For example, the floating PV is one. Island, land areas for PV installation, and we're moving to the marine environment. And you can imagine most islands have a large area of ocean. So like I said, we really need to look at how we can create an enabling environment, but at the same time try to make it confident for the investors to come in as well. So
Thank you both for that. And I would like to now turn to, is Monica online? Monica Goldberg? Yeah, great. So Monica, I'd like to ask you a question. Presuming that you've heard the conversation, I'd like to ask you, since countries such as Seychelles do not typically have adequate funding on their own to implement, for example, RE100, so how can they individually access international financing, and are they able to access through regional or aggregated arrangements? Good morning, Monica, or good afternoon now.
Yeah. Well, thank you for the question. And I'll start talking on behalf of the Green Climate Fund, and of course there are many other financiers as well, and of course they can access other financiers as well. From the Green Climate Fund, we do provide readiness grant, first of all, and that is for the countries for their planning, long-term planning, and readiness for climate finance. And so that you should be aware of, and many SIDS, including Seychelles, have already readiness grants. So please use these for your long-term planning. On investment grants, what we do in DCF, we work on a partnership-based business model. So we do have our accredited entities. So the NDA of the SIDS will have to agree with an accredited entity, whether it's a regional entity in any of the Pacific or Caribbean or any other island region, or whether it's an international accredited entity, to develop a project with a investment for climate resilience, climate mitigation, or climate adaptation. And I can expand on what we would sort of see as useful in terms of types of projects, but that wasn't the question. So I mean,
Can you expand on that?
Yeah, I can expand on that a little
Thanks.
bit, because you mentioned also yourself that there's a little bit of an imbalance between mitigation and adaptation. And since we are governed by the UNFCCC and our board, there's a very strong, how can I say, strategy or focus right now to increase the adaptation, so that our split between adaptation and mitigation is maintained at 50-50, which means that it's very beneficial for reaching to our funds, but also for the country's own planning. It's very beneficial to look at the whole, cross-cutting planning, like I just heard from the Seychelles, and I've seen from some other seats as well, where you do integrate both adaptation and mitigation planning in your investment plan. Just adding also on to some of the very good points that I've heard throughout this presentation on collaboration, increasing the market size, etc. I think in addition to planning, I think it's important also to establish a pipeline, whether it's just to establish a pipeline, maybe prepare land, prepare investment cases, prepare business cases that suits your local legislative environment, so that the market becomes a little bit more mature, and that you can provide investment prospectus for specific markets that you've developed.
Thank you very much, Monica. Tony, I'd like you to pick up on especially the last part that she mentioned, because I think you probably have something to say about that. Because for me, developing a portfolio will require resources, right? And so it's kind of a chicken and egg situation. So love for you to respond, please.
No, you're right. And that's the first thing that came to mind. I mean, island, the resources is very limited. You get people, for example, overwhelmed with the number of responsibilities they have because we don't have enough, capacity to do the work. And when it comes to accessing some of these finances, it's very difficult. You have requirements such as developing terms of reference, developing project concept. I mean, it takes time. It takes a lot of energy and resources to develop that. And in some cases, when you do make requests to these donors, for example, to assist you in preparing this stuff, you probably sometimes get a negative response, saying that the way I finance is specific to more tangible project, but sometimes you have to do these initial soft measures, soft things before you actually get the project. And that's something which we will require in terms of accessibility. If there is a funding out there that say, look, I can help you develop a pipeline, there you go. And like I said, the toolkit is, for us, provides us a platform to start somewhere. But yeah, we require additional resources to develop these things.
Okay, great. And Monica, if you're still there, can you respond to this?
Yes, I'm still here, and I hear you. And we do have, like I mentioned, we do have the readiness grant. We also have project preparation facilitation. And now I'm speaking from GCF. Of course, other financiers have other opportunities. But let me just, again, Tony, because I listened very carefully to your very, ambitious and impressive plan. But I would say it's rather focusing on mitigation only. I didn't really catch so much adaptation investments. So you would then be developing mitigation projects, and that would be just simply less grant financed. It would be higher expectations on leveraging, because that market is more mature. There's a better business case basically than if you include adaptation. So if something, I would say, you did already do a very ambitious plan, but if there is something that you can do more on the social side and the inclusive side and the adaptation side, the resilience against climate change. Because I noticed people use quite a lot of electricity in Seychelles. Actually, per capita utilization of electricity is comparable to, I think, Portugal and some of the other South European countries. So you have people using electricity. Maybe there's an opportunity to sort of work on the resilience and adaptation more in connection to these end users. That's my thinking.
Thank you, Monica. We're going to have to leave it there because I'm told we don't have a lot of time, but maybe that's a conversation that you can take up offline. So I have Ahmed Badr, who is online. Ahmed, thank you for joining us. Question to you. IRENA already has experience in supporting renewable energy projects in Seychelles. So what further steps can Seychelles take to improve the bankability of its renewable energy project offers?
Thank you very much, but allow me to answer this. There is a very important two factual background globally proven. I think it has to add to the very nice discussions that I enjoyed listening to it. Number one is that investors globally, including small island developing states, their main problems is actually about finding bankable projects. It's not about being very far in terms of geographical location. It's not being a small economy. It's not being a big economy. Last of which, if I give an example, let me quote two things. One from Mr. Jamil Al-Ramahi, the CEO of Masdar, who basically said, money is always there. It's about finding a bankable project, a project that attracts investors. And by the way, project that is really ready, it will attract funding, does not need any kind of help. The second and important issue actually is that if you look at for European investor from developed economy, if I pick example of Spain, for example, we basically had in partnership with grant aid support from not grant aid, but concessional funding support from European Commission, a facility that provides support funding for islands in Africa and also small capacity projects in Africa, up to 2 and 3 megawatts, and provide all funding. So from that perspective, I would say that I would like to congratulate Seychelles for the very comprehensive preparedness and proactive approach to attract investors. In IRENA, what do we do is that what I would say that needs to be done is that basically the following. The major factor or the three pillars for pushing energy transition is basically technology deployment of renewables. The second issue is systematic change, and the last of which is reorganization of power system structure. What Seychelles has done is has basically done a very wonderful job and good job on the first two elements. But the third element is not to be planned, but to be prepared or developed based on the feedback and the preparedness for these two items, which is the reorganization of power systems. And here is, I would say that what needs to be happen, that it has to be taken on transactional based project approach that basically has to look on how to attract investors for each project. And this has to come by two things. And this is to answer the question, what needs to be done? Number one, we have to make the market economy locally being prepared. Any local banks has to be there to come and to share and to crowd in with the help of the government, with international financier, even if it goes for symbolic contribution up to 1 to 5%. But this will give a very message of comfort for sharing whatever risk is coming for investors to come in, because as we say, crowding in local economy, it means creating more jobs, achieving SDGs, also showing the ownership of the private sector of the own country, being small island developing states or whatever country, to take the risk and to develop their economy. This is a most important factor. The second important factor actually is the system organizational elements. And this is basically has to be, as I just mentioned, to be happened on case by case basis. But let me elaborate in less than 30 seconds about this. This has to come basically by, for each project, the dashboard that was presented by Deloitte and was briefly explained by my Secretary General, well-respected colleague, that has to be prepared for each project. And this has to be updated always to show readiness. And here is an arena we can play the role that even over pandemic, we achieved to mobilize 500 megawatts of private sector investments, okay, by working on what we call it preparedness, support, and technical assistance through project facilitation by creating what we call it project information document, or PID, that basically attracted 8 private sector investors. And this is the beauty of it, because again, MDBs, all multilateral development banks still have limited resources and bounded by a lot of heavy burden institutional arrangement and requirement. But private sector, they are ready. And the issue is that we can push them when they have this project ready in terms of their attraction, in terms of bankability. I hope I'm myself clear. Over to you. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Ahmed, for that. So, Tony, you've heard. If you could just quickly react to the arena offer, essentially.
I mean, I've been saying that. I mean, for us, it's not a question of getting finances for project. That's the private side. They will do that. What's important is for us to create the environment for it. And that's what we are trying to do. And that's where the request for support. And I believe with IRENA, we have a partner. We already are getting support from them. And they recognize that Seychelles is committed. Seychelles want to move. And they are prepared to help us. And this is where, for all small islands, this preparedness needs to be there. The environment needs to make it that it de-risk the environment for the investors coming. Money is there, for investment. But you have to create an environment that gives them comfort to come in.
Great. Thank you, everyone, for your participation. Thank you to you as well, audience, for participating and listening in today. I think the one big takeaway here is the power of partnerships. I think that that's what we've created together with Commonwealth Secretariat and everyone involved in Seychelles, that none of us can do any of this alone. So I think going forward, this is definitely going to be hopefully a stepping stone that will expand and continue to grow. And that's what we're really excited about. So thank you, everyone. I'm going to now hand it over to Alashe. Thank you.
Thank you, Sherry. Thank you, Louisa, Ahmed. Thank you, Monica. Thank you as well to you, Tony, for that insightful and robust conversation. All of the things that you've been talking about, SG's been scribbling like crazy on the paper she's got on her lap, and she'd like to come back up and then just share some of the ideas of what we can do with the information that we've gathered here today, how we can put actionable steps in place.
Okay, well, I started with a big thank you, and I'm going to endorse that because we had a huge amount of fantastic things come out of this debate. Number one, what Tony said in relation to our small states. We have 32 small states in our family, and they are big blue ocean states, 25, but the others have real capacity. So we have critical mass when we act together. We are acting together as a family, so we already have real replicability. I was trying to make it absolutely clear that we are so proud that Seychelles is now going to be a petri dish to help us to work out how we can get even better. Secondly, just to remind you that our small states, many of them are about the same size of a city. According to the WTO and the World Bank, the drivers of development in the future are going to be cities, and they are going to drive the economy. So anything we do in our small states could be replicable in the cities and the small areas within bigger countries. So we're talking again about replicability. And we have critical mass. Adaptation, wonderful that the Green Fund highlighted adaptation. But just remember what we're doing together with the Universal Vulnerability Index. We're looking at structural shocks. We're looking at the exogenous shocks, and we are responding. So all that information that's going to come out of our UVI, it can go into this. And then big issue, bankable projects. It seems to me that maybe we have a new toolkit as to what does a bankable project actually look like, and how can we make sure we ramp those up. And then the Climate Finance Access Hub. How do we suck out that data to make sure that when we're looking at energy, we are able to identify how to fill the gap? So we've got training, integrated policies. My team is going to really say they really wish this hadn't taken place, because I think I've got a list about 97 things that we are now going to do. But just in case you think it's just the Secretariat, remember we have all your names and you are now our partners. So we'll be asking you, please, as a result of today, just as I've been sitting there thinking, what can we do? What must we do next? Please let us know, what do you think you can do with us to make the reality that we need to make for our member states come true? And I would ask you, all of you, to think and then double it and then treble it, because we can do this and all our partners are with us. So thank you, everybody. And I wonder if I could just indulge myself by asking you to say thank you to all those who contributed today, who spoke, but also thank you for my brilliant little team who are kicking it out of the park.
Thank you, SG. You see why it's so wonderful to work for the Commonwealth Secretariat. We've got a great cheerleading team right at the top. So to just close the session, I'd like to invite Mr. Ronnie Jumeau, who is the Climate Ambassador for the Republic of Seychelles, to bring us the closing remarks and to tell us why we should send finance into Seychelles, the clean energy sector in Seychelles. Mr. Jumeau.
Thank you very much. So there you have it, Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen. Seychelles' case for developing sustainable energy and transiting to a low carbon energy future. Seychelles, ladies and gentlemen, is open for business and for investment in unlocking clean, affordable, and reliable electricity for, please allow me to say it, a vibrant, investor-friendly young nation which already has a track record for ambition, commitment, can-do, and innovation. Ask around, and you will be told that partnerships, public-private partnerships, and to use a term coined by small island developing states, genuine and durable partnerships are all part of the lexicon of sustainable development for Seychelles. Thank you. Unfortunately, the finance minister of Seychelles had to leave because he's speaking all over the place. So thank you to the Minister Nadi Hassan, Seychelles Finance Minister, Commonwealth Secretary General Patricia Scotland, who I think over the years has really proved to be a friend of not just small states, but especially small island states, and doing the best to understand and translate our needs and challenges. And of course, the UN Special Representative for Sustainable Energy for All, C4All. Thank you also, all our other esteemed partners, panelists, our moderator, and presenters, especially our hosts here today, Commonwealth Secretariat, for presenting the toolkit which Seychelles will prove can help SIDS lead by example in showing a pathway to a 1.5 friendly production of clean, affordable, and reliable electricity. It remains for me to wish everyone here a most productive continuation of your day. Thank you for taking your time to come and spend with us. Thank you, everyone.